Welcome back to another episode of the Coffee Made Me Do It podcast. My name is Dario and When I started Bluebird Coffee Roastery, it was a coffee-fueled passion project. Essentially, coffee made me do it. And this podcast is all about exploring motivation, passion, and purpose in and around the coffee industry. Today's guest is Ian Kissick, sixth place finisher at the World Barista Champs in 2024 and the owner of Formative Coffee in London. I had the privilege of spending a bit of time with Ian and brewing some coffee on bar with him in London a few months ago, and this was a wonderful conversation before all of that started, and I'm really excited to share it with you. I hope you enjoy. Here's Ian Kissick. So Fani, who I tagged in that comment, we were filming a brew video the other day and just realized we had no cups.
Yeah.
Like halfway through the video.
Yeah.
So we're like, and he came back with these tiny little cups for filter.
Yeah.
And then he like picks it up. He's like, "What is this? Coffee for ants?" So
yeah.
yeah.
Well, we actually have some Excelsa that we're going to start roasting this week, and it's so small that we have to figure out a new way of like cooling protocol because it falls through the screen of the Loring. Yeah, it's so tiny. So there you go, coffee for ants.
Cheap as coffee for ants, indeed. Oh my word, that's a unique problem to have. Yeah, I've had a mocha before that was like really small, but we didn't have a cooling tray problem, but we did have a drum gap issue. So we had to close that to the point of like it was like so close to touching. Yeah. But it worked, so it was fine. Yeah. Nice. That's interesting. Hey, that it's.
Yeah.
What are you gonna do? Put some mesh down.
I mean, yeah, that was the plan, or like replace the default cooling tray base of the Loring with like a mesh because you can take it out, and I don't know what they've come up with.
That's interesting.
See. Yeah.
Cheapers. Is it your own Loring or you?
No, we slot roast on a 35 kilo.
Okay.
So we roast like every 2 weeks, and we can do up to like 500 kilos. So it's quite nice, like nice way to start. We have no fixed costs. Yeah, it's amazing.
Creamy.
Yeah, it's been a really nice kind of experience, and like having no fixed costs, having like we have space for 4 pallets, although that spills over into like our houses as well.
Of course,
all of that like is really nice, and they have a very nice training space. They've got everything we need really for this.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Such a good situation to be in. I think there's so many great brands like DAC, for example, who started in the shared roasting space, and it's really cool to see.
Yeah.
But I think like just for like to kick off the podcast officially, this is a very casual conversation. But Ian, thanks for joining me.
Pleasure.
This was all like put together essentially through a connection with Iona at Ikawa. And I have to confess, like I hadn't heard your name before until World Barista Champs. And then all of a sudden I was like watching all the semi-final sets and I was like, holy crap, I really am enjoying what you're doing. And then, congratulations on the amazing finish. But for the listeners who aren't aware of your background, I also didn't realize at the time that I'd had a full discussion about you with Marcus.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I just didn't remember the name.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And you've obviously had like a long career in coffee, and Formative is like, widely regarded as one of the best cafes in London and further. Just for our listeners, a bit of background. How did you get into coffee? Like what's brought you to this sort of point in your career?
Before coffee, I worked in IT, in finance, and although I really enjoyed like studying software development, although I enjoyed parts of my role, I found sitting in the middle of a floor of 1,000 people, not seeing even like sunlight coming in through the windows. That's how big the floor was. I found that pretty oppressive. And the workload that I had wasn't particularly inspirational to me at the time. So I found kind of solace in the opportunity to leave my desk for 15 minutes and walk across the square to a cafe that was there. And that was an incredibly busy specialty coffee shop. It was a Taylor Street Baristas, a brand that no longer exists, but that was a small specialty coffee chain. And coffee had always been sort of, through my days in university, something that I had grown more and more of an appreciation of. to the point where I understood coffee like its flavor and taste varied depending on where it came from. I had some idea of the kinds of coffees that I like Ethiopian naturals or East Africa's in general. But at that point, I began to think, as maybe I looked at my career to that point and said, this is not something I want to continue. I saw this cafe, selling maybe 1,500 coffees a day, and I saw, okay, maybe there's a business opportunity here. And more than that was actually having conversations with baristas and understanding for the first time that maybe service and hospitality was more than just a kind of gap-filling job that people do because they don't have something else to do. So I left my job in, I think, December 2015 or 16. And I knew I needed to have some form of income, and I wanted a way to kind of expedite my journey in specialty coffee. So I set up a small multi-roaster coffee subscription where we would buy coffee from roasters around the UK and Europe and basically resell it. That allowed me to very quickly kind of expedite my learning and meet a lot of people I wouldn't have had the opportunity to do otherwise. Eventually that subscription, I ended it because it was a strange battle between what I wanted to sell and making money, because I didn't want to increase my prices for customers. But as time moved on, I started moving away. Okay, I can get your nice Brazilian coffee for £5 and I can make £4 profit per customer.
But you know what's on the other end of the menu.
Yeah, exactly. So by the end of it, I would just two coffees I would really like maybe I made money and maybe I didn't. So I decided, okay, let's end the subscription. Anyway, after about 4 or 5 months, that was kind of up and running and paying the rent. So I went, and I knew that in the medium term I wanted to have my own cafe. So I went and I actually worked for Taylor Street Baristas, which had a very good training program at the time. And I worked for them for about a year until I found the site that Formative is now in Westminster. We opened up there. That's just over 5 years ago now. Since then, we've seen a lot of change. On our first anniversary to the day, we had to close for COVID. Then as we were coming out of COVID, we decided to start kind of taking more control of the roasting process. So we started roasting for ourselves. And then over the past few months, we've started to invest a little bit more in wholesale and e-commerce. So it's been quite a nice journey up until this point. On the kind of rabbit hole of coffee. I think I've learned a lot of lessons along the way, and excited to see what the next few years have in store.
That's so interesting. I mean, going from, a corporate career in a completely different industry and then moving, directly into business ownership and not first working in the industry. I kind of did the same thing where I also just started roasting coffee straight away. And that was passion driven and whatever. And it was lots of not financially motivated decisions in the beginning. And then obviously you start a business and it's okay, we actually have to make some money now. Yeah. But were you brewing a lot of coffee at home at that time as well? Was that a passion, or were you more fascinated by the business?
I think I was, the business, I think I always wanted to have my own business. I was, I think, quite entrepreneurial as a child. I would collect golf balls at a local golf course from, which had been abandoned in the kind of forests. And I would run them through the dishwasher and then I'd sell them, or I'd buy bendy pencils that were 30 centimeters long, cut them in half and then sell them for the same price. All these stupid things, as a kind of primary school child. So I think business, I always wanted to have control over my own time and have a job where the amount of effort that I put in was almost directly correlated with the output, whether it's in terms of the personal reward that I feel, but also monetary.
Of course.
So that was a big driver.
And I'm yet to visit your shop. I'm going to be there with you guys tomorrow, and I can't wait. From what I've seen, it is a really advanced coffee nerd haven. And I know from personal experience, even at home, it's very expensive to set something like that up. But in the middle of London, it must have been a huge risk to open a space like that.
I think, yeah, I suppose it was. I suppose in starting the brand, something that I sometimes forget, and just to come back to your last question, like it was entrepreneurialism, but it was also like an obsession with coffee. And whenever I left my corporate job and started like the subscription and later started working as a barista, like I realized how little I'd known. But what I did know whenever I was like working in IT was that there was a real demand, especially for like young, what's the word, like young professionals were very keen to buy into the lifestyle of specialty coffee to the point where, they were spending quite a lot of money on coffee. So there was that element of like risk. Yes, I'm going to put a lot of money, a lot of time, and like what little reputation I had on the line, and do something where at the point where we started, we didn't actually have sugar, for example. We didn't have any syrups. We didn't have soy milk. We made a lot of decisions to limit ourselves and focus on flavor. So there were risks there, but I also felt that I owed it to myself to build a business centered around what I believe to be true about coffee. And whenever I look at coffee, but also spaces outside coffee, those are the brands which I believe in, ones that are actually focused on like a founder's beliefs. So I feel that Formative is really an embodiment of everything that I believed, and that's probably the thing that I felt was most on the line when I opened the cafe. I felt that if I can make this work, with no sugar, in an area that had very limited specialty coffee exposure at the time in London, if I can make that work, then that was great. But if I couldn't, that's a lesson as well, not just for me, but the industry. Because if what we're doing is actually focused on, good coffee, well brewed, and we're focusing on flavor, and we can't find a commercial appetite for that, then that says something wrong.
That's really interesting. Wrong. Yeah, I completely hear that. Do you guys have sugar today?
Yeah, I think through COVID. So COVID was very difficult for us, and I remember I would work at the beginning when we were allowed to open, but it was just takeaway only. I would just work there by myself, and maybe I would have 15 customers a day.
Wow. And
I felt that if someone came in and, they asked for a 12-ounce drink, and I said no. They asked for syrup, and I said no. And they asked for X, Y, and Z. And it's just no. And I felt, that's one of my 15 customers a day, and I can't say yes to anything. So during COVID, we did become a bit more accommodating. So we have sugar like under the counter now.
The reason I ask is because I swore blind I'd never start a cafe. And when I finally did, it was coming out of COVID. So I had a space that was mostly like industrial for the roastery, but there was a bit of retail trade, and there were people looking for jobs, and I was like, cool, let's just open a cafe. It'll be good, it'll be fun. It's attached to the roastery, like it won't be a lot of work for me. Little did I know. And we opened with like 3 drinks on the menu, like filter black and white, no sugar, like small drinks only. And I think it took us 2 weeks to change the whole menu, because it was the same thing. I just hate disappointing people, and it's just, who am I to tell people how they're supposed to enjoy their coffee? Like, we want to brew our coffee the way that we love to brew it. But there's certain things where people get to make the last decision.
I think it's in this question of, what do you include on the menu? So there was a point at which I said to myself, okay, anything we have the ingredients for, we can make. I mean, we don't want to necessarily make, but we can make. But we've moved away from that, so we definitely say no to ristrettos and lungos, for example. Not that lungos can't be good, but we don't dial in for them, so we're not serving that. But understanding like where the kind of lines are, the red lines that you're not going to cross in terms of quality, and what you're going to promote as well on your menu. You might have off-menu items, but what's on your menu is really important and really difficult. I think that it's easy to be really idealistic and say we're only going to do this, that, and the other. And, it comes down to, okay, what I personally believe, and how can I hold to what I personally believe and want to be true about the coffee industry, but also be more inclusive of people who are going to actually buy into this story and help grow a brand together. Because if I only, like, to begin with, I was only going to do 6-ounce milk drinks, and now we do 6 and 8-ounce milk drinks, which is a small concession.
Absolutely.
But like, how do we make sure that every item that we have on the menu is exceptional? And to me, that's become more important than, you know, how do we just have the things that I want to drink?
That makes sense. Yeah, no, I can relate to that. And yeah, I mean, we have to, we live in a very price sensitive market in South Africa, and I would say that's my number one frustration, because, but to be honest with you, it's also the reason why we can do business in Europe, because with our pricing plus shipping, it's still affordable to get our coffee.
It's very affordable, I agree.
which is so interesting. So what I think what a lot of people would do would probably have like a dollar price for the international markets and a rand price for home. But to be honest with you, like, I'm happy making the margin that we're making, and I'd rather sell more coffee internationally. So I'm very happy to structure it that way and hopefully build long-term relationships instead of just like a once-off purchase. But having said that, we really struggle to sell anything that's like considered reasonably expensive. Certainly business to business, it's very difficult. We do have quite a nice like home consumer base, but I find myself having to make very strategic price decisions, which is difficult sometimes because I'm not very good at that. You know, we have a subscription program where I think probably 6 out of 12 months we don't really make any money on it. You know, it's just like a passion thing. And, but I understand what you mean when it comes to like, if you're going to put your time and energy into something that you're passionate about and you want people to experience it in a certain way, it's very difficult to make those concessions and to find the line between inclusive and exceptional. It's something that Marcus and I, Marcus from the Sweet Spot, we speak about quite often. Is like volume versus quality, you know, and it's like no, one doesn't have to be exclusive. You can do both, and I think you can be inclusive and exceptional as well. So just as an aside, I can't wait to be in your space and to come and actually experience it. You know, like I'm like torn. I'm excited to brew our coffee there, but I also just want to be a customer.
You know, I think that's one of my favorite things about travel is that, you know, there are fantastic coffee shops in many countries now all over the world, but seeing coffee through other people's eyes, like, you can kind of do it in your own city, but London is somewhat homogenous, right? If I go outside London, maybe if I go to Glasgow or Edinburgh, if I go back home to Northern Ireland or Dublin, you know, you start to see different influences and you start to think, okay, like, coffee service could be like this. If I travel to South Africa, I would see like another take on like the service of coffee, or the US or to Asia. And that's, I think, like, one of the joys of being a tourist who loves coffee, or a coffee tourist, is like, you break out of this kind of industry which everyone is referencing each other, and you get to see like when we went to Busan earlier in the year for World Barista Championship, like, all of the coffee was radically different in terms of like roast style, in terms of service, in terms of like the environment, all different to anything I've ever had in London. And that's really exciting because it's refreshing. It's not that you want to copy and paste, but you can take inspiration and you can kind of sit back. You're in holiday mode as well to an extent. You can sit back and enjoy.
From like a problem solving point of view as well, you know, when you're in it, it's difficult to see beyond the immediate. And I was taught this principle years ago of locking out and then assessing what's around you and locking back in. And I think nothing for me personally does it better than travel. So I almost find like an annual trip to Europe as the best refresher, and I always come back with ideas and inspiration. But as you say, it's not about copying, because to be honest with you, you probably would find that what's happening in another part of the world that really is exciting there might not translate very well here. but there's a nuance or a lesson they can.
Absolutely. I mean, we went to Momo's a few times, and like their roastery space was just incredible.
I just want their green storage facility.
It's unbelievable, and like that it can be so functional and yet so beautiful is incredible to me. But like the idea of like in the moment on holiday, it's fine, but the idea of like waiting 30 minutes for a coffee, which everyone there was happy waiting.
Really?
That you could do that in London and be commercially successful is insane.
No,
and they are commercially successful. So like even cultural impact of being willing to wait for something that's extraordinary just doesn't exist everywhere. So your culture kind of, as much as you want to try and like affect your coffee culture, or if you're very ambitious, your culture more broadly, like your culture also impacts on what you're able to do. You know?
That's amazing. I can't think of many people who would wait like at home who would wait 30 minutes for a coffee. But it is interesting. I remember having a conversation with a good friend of mine, Jordan Montgomery, about, you know, the challenges that we have at home around pricing and that sort of thing, and the coffees I want to buy, but then the coffees I can actually sell. And this was quite a few years ago now, and he was sharing with me how in Australia, for example, in Melbourne versus Sydney, the culture is so different that they found their freezer menu to be the best solution for that problem. Came home immediately, bought a freezer, and started freezing coffee, and it's been huge for us, to have that flexibility to actually be able to serve that kind of coffee without the pressure of selling it within a month. And again, without travel, without experiencing other people's perspectives, we would never have solved that problem, which is pretty cool.
That's, I mean, whenever you're buying especially expensive coffees, figuring out where they're going, how you're going to use them is really difficult. That's one thing that, I mean, competition is very expensive in general. But if you say, okay, we're going to compete with this coffee, well, you can always earmark a lot of that lot specifically for competition and feel slightly less bad if you don't sell all of it. But yeah, like
it's so true.
Tricky,
And wow, like we bought a couple of lots from Lost Origin recently, and I mean, I was so impressed with what they were doing, and I'm such a fan of their sort of like relentless pursuit of quality and experimentation, that I was chasing Andy and Franz for coffee for like a year, you know, and then eventually they were like, don't worry, like you can stop harassing us, like we saved you some coffee. And I was like, amazing, send me as much as you can. And they sent the offer list through, and then I was like, oh crap. And we still we were working our way through it. It's so expensive. Luckily the coffees held up really, really well, and we have the green in the freezer and all that kind of stuff. But it is difficult. It's difficult to sell those types of coffee. So I think for me, one of the solutions to that problem has been investing in our European, well, not European, only our international customer base. Because as Marcus always says to me, it doesn't make sense for him to ship out cheap coffee because the cost of shipping is too high, so they'll always buy the better stuff.
I think as well, like, I don't know a lot about South Africa's market, but if you're selling to shops in Europe, most of them are going to be multi-roaster, and the multi-roaster shops are always looking, they want a range of coffees, like something really cheap-ish, and then something in the middle, and then something higher.
Exactly.
So like those, because you're already targeting multi-roasters in Europe, and there are quite a lot across Europe. Unfortunately, we don't have easy access anymore to the rest of the EU here in the UK. But because you're already targeting them, they're like a perfect market for you to kind of ship some of that coffee through. Exactly.
And I think, and shipping to the UK, for example, has been one of our easiest logistical markets, I forgot to ask you, has your coffee arrived?
It has,
Thank God. I thought about it this morning. I was like, oh my word, I actually haven't checked on your shipment specifically.
Our GM, Jody, actually messaged me, and she was like, oh, some sad news, the 4 bags of Johnson aren't here. And I was like, oh, don't worry.
They're in my house.
They're special delivery.
What happened was our Jansen got held up in customs much longer than expected. And then I roasted, but I didn't want to I roasted a bunch of different profiles. And I was like, I'm not committing to what I'm sending you until the
Yeah.
last minute. So we've selected the best batches.
Carried by hand.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we sent a bunch to Motors in Paris as well. And a couple of other people have taken some Janssen. But it was quite funny because my personal favorite lot that we bought this year from them, I think I have 800 grams left. I'm like, now what?
Yeah.
We're not going to be competing with
home,
that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yes.
So no, it's great. It's awesome to have the support, and thanks for blindly trusting us and welcoming.
It's not
me into
completely
your
blind.
cafe.
It's reputation based as well.
Jeepers.
Right?
I must admit, I had a bit of a moment this morning standing outside of Roslyn and seeing our poster on the telephone booth. I was like, who the hell are we? Like, this
very
is
surreal.
It is very surreal. It is very surreal. So it's wonderful. I've been very grateful for all the support, and we are unapologetically obsessed, and I think we tend to end up working with people who are the same way. So
find one another.
Exactly, we find one another. Exactly. So I'm really curious now. You've left your job, started the subscription, started a cafe, quality focus. COVID hits, you survive, come out the other end, and obviously now your cafe is doing its thing, and you're not as involved in terms of the day to day anymore. You're more involved, you were saying earlier, in the training and roastery side of things.
Yeah.
Where did the competition sort of focus come up for you? When did you decide to take a swing?
I suppose whenever I started working in coffee, maybe my years are all mixed up, but let's say 2017. Mid 2017. At that point, one of the easiest ways to find out more about coffee was through watching competition routines. Things have changed a little bit, where I feel we've advanced quite a lot. So every year, competition is not quite the same platform for new ideas about brewing. Maybe it's about the coffee chain more broadly, and about how we view coffee. But it's not, here's a new brewing technique. It's rare that it's the case that there's a new brewing technique that comes out and suddenly everyone is using an EK.
Exactly. Those great leaps have already happened.
Yeah. So there was that. There was also the fact that whenever I started working as a barista, we were taught to the WBC tech score sheet standard. And the company that I worked at, Taylor Street Baristas, did have a big emphasis on competition. So I think the first time I competed, I think I entered Brewers Cup the day before.
Nice.
And I've done this in 2 competitions in my life. I entered the day before, just for fun, because I was going to the heat anyway to help someone else. And I came, I think, joint 17th, and the top 16 went through to semi-finals. So I was very happy with that result, because it meant I didn't have to do any more work. And then similar for my first Barista Championship. So I've now done it 5 times, I think. 5 times. My first Barista Championship, I prepared really nicely. I used a natural Rwandan coffee. I knew what my signature drink was going to be, but I didn't really feel like I wanted to try making it to see what it was like. It involved honey, and I put the honey in syringes because I wanted to be very precise in terms of measurement, but the venue was extremely cold, so it was very difficult for me to get the honey, which had solidified almost, inside of these syringes into my signature drink. So I went, I think, 50 seconds over time. Otherwise, I would have gotten through to semi-finals. So again, this being, I think that was maybe 7 or 8 months into being a barista. So I was very happy to not quite make it to semi-finals, because I'd done well, but there was nothing else to do, and that was nice. Then the next few years, I found quite difficult with competition. I had a defect in one of the coffees that I used. I can't remember what happened the other year, but I didn't make it to semi-finals, and I got really frustrated and actually decided I wasn't going to compete anymore. And then the time of my 4th Barista Championship, we had someone who was competing who didn't share kind of what they were going to do, who didn't ask for any input until the last 2 days before they were going to go and perform. And then they asked me to come and watch, and I watched, and I thought, you know what, like this isn't hard to for me to come up with a routine and enter and see how we do. So I decided the next day, which was the day before the heats, that I am actually going to enter. So I bought a ticket. I kind of had an idea of what I'd do as a routine. And I went, and I think I placed 9th overall nationally in heats, which qualified me for semi-finals. So my routine was more or less, actually this was my third time competing in Barista Championships, not my fourth. But my routine was more or less, every day I wake up and I go to work and I have to take some coffee off the shelf and dial it in. That's what I'm going to do today. I don't have a speech for you. I don't have a routine. I haven't practiced.
So
we're just
cool.
going to share coffee. So yeah, it was really good fun. And the coffee was great. It was a mocha from Cafe Granja de Esperanza. So it was fantastic. Then we went through and we came third that year in the UK with a little bit more practice. And then the year after that, I won UKBC for the first time. I feel like competition is a big exercise in project management, more or less. If you have the kind of team around you, if between yourself and your teammates you have the set of abilities that you need in terms of sourcing coffee, roasting it and brewing it and describing it, then what kind of remains is project management, ensuring that whatever needs to be done is done to the right level of quality by a certain time. And I feel that for the UK that year, which is last year, 2023, we kind of excelled in project management, but in Worlds, we did not.
Okay.
So almost everything went wrong because we just weren't, we were organized in some areas, but everything that could have went wrong. So I think we placed 18th or 19th last year. And then on to this year. So this year, because I want to, at some point in the future, move back to Northern Ireland. I competed in Ireland, went over there, placed first, and then went out to Busan in, I think, May. I don't know, seems a long time ago. But earlier this year. And we competed, and I remember standing for the semi-finals announcements. My name wasn't called out, and we were fairly sure that we'd done well enough to get through. We thought we'd be placed somewhere between like 8th and 12th. So my name wasn't called out, and I just spent like that night and the next morning thinking, it actually went well. So what are we missing?
Exactly.
What are we missing? And we went for the debrief for the next day because we thought we were out. Had a great chat with the judges, saw the score sheets, and I was quite happy, and one of my coaches was all of us were happy, because we saw the scores and they were all very high. And my thought was, okay, if I've done this well and I haven't got through, then everyone who's beaten me has done really, really well. One of my coaches had a different thought, which was, he's done this well, how has he not gone through? There must be something wrong. And so he spent a lot of time figuring out what the issue was and realized that our final score tallied in the head judge sheet was not the score in the rankings.
Oh my word.
And so where we thought we'd come, I think 17th, we were actually 8th or 9th. And so we made it through to the semi-finals.
I remember seeing that happening on social media. And my first thought was, because it happened so last minute.
Yeah.
And my first thought was sympathy for you, because now you've gone from, I can only imagine, you've gone from disappointments of not making it to excitement that you have, but also how the hell do you get ready for this now in 4 minutes?
I think it was quite an interesting time because myself and Maya, one of my coaches, basically went off to explore the trade show after our debrief. And Nick, my business partner, and the other coach, just spent over an hour and a half reading the score sheets. So I was kind of okay. I was quite happy. And then Nick called us, and we had to go back and have a conversation with some of the coordinators and the SCA staff. And the conversation was, this error has happened. Can you compete again? And it was at that point, can you compete again this afternoon in 4 hours or so? Which we couldn't because, we were freeze distilling milk. Actually, we changed our milk for semifinals thankfully, because it wasn't very good in the first round. But we borrowed some like Roastery evaporated milk for semi-finals, which gave us a big jump. Anyway, we didn't have the time to make signature drink and milk ingredients. So we said, well, we can't do that. Could we potentially defer? And they said, okay, well, think about it. So we went away and came back, and they said, actually, there's another option. You could compete tomorrow morning. And, you know, at that point, I think a lot of people asked me, you know, how are you dealing with this emotionally? And it's just like, I was disappointed I hadn't gone through, and I was elated that I had another shot. But at the end of the day, I think that we went into it very grounded. We had very clear expectations of what we wanted to do this year, and that was get to finals. But we also, like when we went to Ireland, my feeling was, if I don't win this, it's not that something's gone terribly wrong. It's not that someone else is so much better than us. It's because we haven't prepared enough.
Okay.
And so that's the question now. It's not, you know, it's inevitable that I'll get through to semifinals, or it's inevitable that I'll get through to finals. But it's, you know, have we done enough to rule out all the silly errors, to rule out any confusion in the judge's mind about what I'm saying? So, yeah, like there was a lot of emotion, but it wasn't like overwhelming. We were pretty happy to have another shot, but not like
and then you didn't just have another shot.
Emotion.
You kind of nailed that round.
Yeah.
Made it through to finals.
Yeah.
And I think it was like, yeah, it was so good. It was in Athens. I'm sure you'll remember. Oh my gosh, I'm blanking on his name. Vlad's brother.
Oh
from
yeah,
Ukraine,
yeah.
Ruslan. And he had all the tech issues on stage, and we were like quite close with them, and we'd been like tasting coffee with Jordan and Nicole and the team, and it was like devastating to watch him go through that and have like 3 grinder changes.
And the crowd was so big then as well.
Well, when he
everyone
started, it was
for
tiny.
Announcements. Yeah.
So I, in my mind, I was like, this is amazing because his story needs to be told. Yeah. And literally while he's waiting, the crowd's filling in. But at the same time, he doesn't speak a word of English.
Yeah.
Literally not a word of English. And I was like, how do you pick up halfway through your script and just keep going, you know? And when he did and he nailed it, it was like such BMT. Like he was just so good. And again, like excelled in the next round and whatever. Yeah. And I had that same feeling where, you know, you seem to like step up in semi-finals. And it could have gone either way. Yeah. You know, it could have been like really, really, you know, you've also got this like pressure, like, okay, so he wasn't in, now he's in, and he goes and messes up the...
Well, you know, like, I think like from our perspective, we did really nail semifinals. We were like second place. We were still like 30 points off Jag, but we were second place in semifinals. And I think like the way I've spoken about it, but also now when I watch semifinals and finals back, like I just think our energy dipped so much. Okay. You know, and we changed some decisions for the finals in terms of dial-in, but like, how can you prepare to do like 2 finals routines, start of the day and end of the day, and just insane. That pressure. But I think once we'd been announced to go to semi-finals again, you have a big peak in adrenaline kind of. So that was maybe more emotional, like the finals announcements.
And then goal setting. Sorry.
Yeah, like just to kind of
to get in.
That was almost enough.
And as you said, your goal was to make finals.
Yeah.
And there's this concept in goal setting of having a through goal.
Yeah.
Which is, you know, if you're talking in the context of like building a business and you have a certain goal that you're aiming for, and as you're approaching that goal, you can then sit down, strategize, and set a through goal. Yeah. But when it happens in the same way, and you're like, wow, I was out of semis, now I was in semis, now I've made finals. I can just imagine the energy vacuum that must happen after that.
Yeah. I think as well, like, I'm not generally someone who likes, I mean, sorry, maybe this sounds really stupid coming out of a coffee competitor's mouth, but I don't like to be like the center of attention.
Sure.
And walking around a trade show after everything that happened, like it was very hard for me to like almost walk, 100 meters without being stopped by 10, 12 people and explaining the situation. So I think it was exciting, but it's draining, and understanding like how to regulate your emotions in times like that is is it's challenging. But I think like on the whole, we were really happy, and given the circumstances, very, very happy with our final placing. And like our whole, like the way that we designed drinks, the way that we chose coffee, we, you know, chose it with that goal in mind. And it was finals. It wasn't necessarily winning, but it was let's be in with a shot, get to finals, and then let's see what happens.
And what coffee did you use?
So we used 2 coffees. For espresso, we used white honey processed geisha from Sebastian Ramirez, which is really nice, super elegant, clean. Lots of like yuzu, jasmine. So with that coffee, like one of the kind of limitations that people find when they first try it is you get like a lot of lemongrass. We found that if we used a really high dose, we could get rid of that and move into like rose or jasmine, maybe chamomile, but really like nice florals. But I think for a lot of judges that judged my routine, like the feedback was that it was really like elegant and structured, like refreshing, kind of because you have the yuzu, apricot or peach, and like jasmine and green tea. So like on the finish, it's like really green tea, sometimes oolong. So really interesting as an espresso. And then on milk drink, I kind of struggled a lot with finding a coffee for milk this year, but we settled on the same coffee that I used for Worlds last year because we had some of it left. Which was a yellow bourbon from Wilton Benitez.
Okay.
So like quite like a lot of flavor intensity, and it cuts through milk really nicely.
Thermal shock.
Yeah. All the good stuff.
The reason I'm laughing is we have a few of his coffees on our menu at the moment, and there are definitely a few characteristics that seem to exist in every single cup, regardless of varietal and processing and all the rest of it. And it's interesting to me, like, where's the line now of
I think, you know, the first time I came across his coffees was last year before UKBC, the UKBC that we won. We used one of his like small lots. So he has like big bioreactors that I think do like 1 ton at a time, and then he does like 24 kilo lots in his conservatory, or at least he did at the time. And we had a pink bourbon from him, and it was just unbelievable. So we had, in the UK, we served natural Hartmann Geisha on espresso, and this is 2023, and we used the pink bourbon in milk and signature drink. And, you know, one of the judges was like, this is the first milk drink I ever thought, like, I don't actually need to taste this. I can smell, like, what it's going to taste like without even drinking it. I was like, this is good feedback. But I think that, you know, there's a lot of conversation around like Colombian coffees and advanced processing techniques and infusing and co-fermenting. And I think a lot of it's like from a kind of position of intellectual arrogance. Like my field, you know, there are coffees that I buy as a consumer and as a professional that I'm not entirely sure what's happened in the processing. And that's not ideal. But are those coffees actually going to engage my customers? Are they going to make them care more about what they're drinking? Like for the first time, we've bought a coffee that, like, I know has been like, I think, what's the word? At least co-fermented, maybe infused, but like it's a green apple co-ferment, I think, and it is just like really, really, really sour green apple. Like this is perfect for Halloween. Let's do this. It's epic. Like coffee can taste like this. That's okay. Like maybe it's not like a traditional process, but it can taste like this, and that's all you need sometimes to get someone to start to think a little bit more about what's going on in their cup. To start to think, actually, well, what is coffee? It's a fruit. Well, a lot of people, they have no idea that coffee, okay, they're like coffee beans, but what is that?
Exactly.
You know, what is processing? Why does like Brazil taste different to Ethiopia? Like, that's what most of our customers, the level of understanding that they have. They're not sitting going, okay, I'll only have like washed East African coffees and that's it because I hate naturals. Like that's not reality, and it's easy for us as coffee professionals to kind of look down our noses at what people are doing to try and actually make some more money in Colombia and in other countries, but does it actually produce something that tastes good?
Yeah.
That's always going to be my metric. And if it doesn't taste good, and most of the co-fermented coffees, most of the infused coffees that I've had, I've not enjoyed, but if it tastes good, then I would like to know more. But if it tastes good, I'm going to drink it.
It's a great perspective, and I think there isn't, I'm having this type of conversation with a lot of people, as I'm sure you are, and it's quite a controversial topic in the industry at the moment, as I think it should be, because we have spent, as an industry, we've spent a lot of time talking about terroir and varietal and farming practices and sorting and so on and so forth. And I think you make a good point that most of the co-ferments and infused coffees aren't actually tasting that great. And I think I have a theory that when that sort of level of processing has happened, there's this assumption that even sorting is pointless. So the coffees that I've seen that have undergone that type of processing, you can almost visibly see that there's been less effort after fermentation than like a already clean washed geisha from Colombia or whatever the case may be. But I think I have my own opinion on those types of coffees, as everybody does. But the one thing I can agree with is that there probably is space for everything, and if it's clearly communicated to the customer and they're getting to choose what they're drinking, that's cool. What I find more interesting though is I don't compete myself, but I'm very involved in competition because two of my staff are very passionate about competing and have very strong goals to make it to World Barista Champs and to do well. And a lot of we've actually built parts of our business to support, as you were saying earlier, to support the sale of these competition level coffees, because what the heck do you do with 5 options for competition and you're going to use a kilo on the day, you know? So we've kind of like built elements of our business to support us purchasing these types of coffees, and I think that's made us better at brewing them. Because we get to work with them all the time, not just once a year. But my point being, we enjoy fermentation, definitely, but as a company, I'm the buyer of our green coffee. For myself, clean coffees are what I look for. We do have some like funky anaerobics and that type of thing, but I'm very much focused on clean coffees, and the debate has been, do we take a Bluebird coffee to competition or do we take a competition coffee to competition? Because the two aren't always the same.
I think even that term like competition coffee is one that I find I think Sebastian, when we met him in Busan, was like, it's not even a competition coffee that we had used. I know we got fantastic scores for that coffee. And it's not been designed for competition. It's not been like some intricate fermentation process beyond what he normally does. It's just very a very classic geisha, I would say, like super clean, great florals, some tropical fruit, some stone fruit, and some citrus fruit. Like really
well
classic
roasted,
geisha.
well brewed.
Yeah, and I think that the danger is that you look at like this year's WBC and you see 3 what are fantastic coffees from Jameson Savage, like phenomenal coffees. I love drinking them, but that doesn't mean that you can only win national or world competitions with those coffees. It doesn't mean that after Anthony won with Ombligon, you saw lots of people competing with Ombligon. But that's not the answer. The answer is to find something and to display the best characteristics of it.
Absolutely.
And judges are always changing their minds. Like the first time, whenever you started to see Diego Bermudez and later Wilton Benitez's coffees come through, those were strikingly different to everything. But especially in, for example, Brewers Cup, I would say that you're always better going with something that sure has flavor intensity, but is clean, super clean. So I think that in terms of processing, those very heavily processed coffees, for me, they always work really well in milk and signature drinks. But I want to drink them as espresso, maybe as a one-off, but as a judge, I would say that clean and a very like a well-brewed example of a classic coffee is almost always better.
Sure. And we saw that this year.
Yeah.
I mean, there were quite a few. I mean, I didn't get to taste any of them.
Yeah.
I wasn't in Busan, but like it sounded as though there were a lot of washed geisha, you know, and like that makes me really, really happy.
Yeah.
But as you say, I think on the milk side, you still need something that's bigger.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be. We may never see. I don't know. We may never see a washed geisha winning the best milky.
Yeah.
You know?
I think I'm not sure if Taka used whether he used like because his coffee was washed. I'm pretty sure it was a washed geisha from Savage.
And did he use it for?
I think he might have used it in
wow.
milk drinks and things.
Well, I eat my words. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That makes me even happier.
But maybe he would have scored higher if he had used a different coffee.
Sure. And like washed as well.
Yeah,
Like we've got some pretty interesting washed.
Just for context, there were air quotes there.
Yes, exactly. There were air quotes around washed. I mean, we have a coffee. I think. I hope I've sent some to you as well. It's the Bio Innovation washed from La Palma.
I think so, yeah.
The Pink Bourbon.
Yeah.
But that's what's being served at Roslyn on batch at the moment, or on filter. Yeah. But it's a really cool coffee.
Yeah.
But it's had some advanced processing before it was dried.
Yeah.
So what happened before it was dried makes a big impact.
Yeah.
But having said that, it is like super clean and does have like qualities of a washed, a classic washed Pink Bourbon.
I would like us to find ourselves in a place where, the processing is important, but the processing is, how does this taste like this?
Okay.
And not to the point where, how does this taste like green apple? Well, because it was infused with green apple.
Yes.
But like,
yes, exactly.
Does the coffee taste good? Yeah, it tastes amazing, and it's complex. And it's got great like flavor clarity. Okay, like why? Like our menu in this shop is all focused on flavor.
Okay.
So like yuzu, for example. Why does that taste like yuzu? I haven't figured it out yet. But why does it taste?
Is that on the packaging? It says yuzu. Is that
yeah?
Right?
So on our packaging, but also like on our menu board.
So cool.
So rather than, what does like washed Ecuadorian Typica mean to more than 1% of our customers?
Exactly.
Like, you have to be able to connect the experience that the customers actually have and right there in front of you. And then if they enjoy that, then the questions come, why does it taste like that?
On my to-do list for the last 3 years for our cafe has been to turn our cafe menu into a milkshake menu.
Nice.
So like, you choose a bubblegum milkshake, you don't care how they got there. It's
Yeah.
just like that's what it's going to taste like.
Yeah.
And I've kind of thought that would be a good way to sell coffee. So I'm really excited to be in your space and see that, because I can't think of an example in the cafe that I've personally been to where the main communication point is flavor.
Yeah.
It's normally something else first and then it tastes like.
I think, Mame don't quite do it the same way as us, but I think on their packaging, they have a flavor wheel on the colors.
Yes,
so
on the top of the
similar.
Yeah, I've seen that.
But
I've seen that. We've always chosen like the color of our bags
Yeah.
or whatever to be reminiscent of what we're tasting. But often when you're like, this coffee is really green.
Yeah.
People are like, what? But I like when I started tasting coffee, that's what that happened first for me, is I could like start seeing a color and then learn to describe it, which I think is pretty common.
Yeah. But like for us, we have a very wide spectrum of customers, A lot of people are somewhere in the middle. Like they like good coffee and they kind of understand what they like. Maybe they really like, this is just our customer base, but they really like natural Ethiopia, or maybe they just like Brazilian coffees, or maybe they're really into the more advanced Colombian stuff. But, we have customers who come in and they have never heard anything beyond supermarket blends in a French press. But they come and it's a treat for them, and they start to quickly say, I don't like the fruity coffees in my, latte. Can I have the chocolate or nutty one? But it starts to make them think, and you start to have conversations around, how come it tastes like that? And some of the customers, first-time customers, are like, are they syrups? No, it's just, you have an opportunity to give what is actually education right there, which is no, coffee is a fruit. And depending on where you grow it in the world and the type of soil and the exact type of plant and how you process it. And this is information that like we just take for granted.
Exactly.
But, like there's a lot of our customers walking through the door, especially tourists, but also many people who work in the area who just have no idea. And at the other end, if you're a specialty coffee professional, well, it's nice to go in somewhere and not be blinded by names.
Yeah.
Right? Not see Finca Paraiso, not see Café Granja de Esperanza or X, Y, and Z, but instead think, okay, I can have a conversation about flavor and the type of cup profile that I want. And okay, the prices might tell me something about the coffee, but really I can go there and do it blind, and then I can taste it and then say what I think, and then we can have a conversation about the coffee.
About what it is.
It's really approachable, I think. And it means
I really like that.
Also, you don't have to go in and say, like, I remember going to a cafe in London that had Bazira Gahindwa, which is a washing station, I think, in Burundi, on the board as one of our filter options. And I went and I asked for this, and like, it's not an easy thing to say.
Exactly.
And the barista was like, what? I was like, Bazira Gahindwa. He was like, what? I was like, that coffee there in the board. I'm like, if I, at this point working in coffee, feel reluctant to say that, how many customers are you putting off?
No, it's absolutely, it's so true. And I think that's it was certainly one of the driving forces behind the approach that I wanted to take with my company, which was to try and get rid of the pretension.
Yeah.
And
I think your packaging is really good for that as well. It's super accessible.
Thank you. This is our third version of our packaging now, and it's just like a rebrand that we've just done recently. But the previous one was very like illustrative with the flavor notes like hanging from a tree. And at that time, it's been quite an interesting progression because Bluebird's like going into its 6th year now. And 5 years ago, I would say that the market was so disconnected from what coffee is. Even when I say the market, I think the bigger market still is, as I am very disconnected to the process of, processing rice. I consume it all the time, but I'm not connected to it, and I think that's fine. But there was such a big disconnect even amongst customers who regarded themselves as like coffee enthusiasts. So I felt my responsibility at that time was to actually just remind people coffee's a fruit. It's grown in amazing places at high altitude, and the farming is really important, and that's like the thing that we need to focus on. But since over the last 5 years, I think that people really have the average consumer engaging in specialty coffee has definitely improved their understanding, and I really credit James Hoffman and Lance Hendrick and all the guys on YouTube doing such a great job, because it's such accessible information where you don't have to go and have like an awkward conversation with a barista in a cafe. Like,
I think COVID as well like accelerated that a lot whenever people had to brew coffee at home.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. I think, I mean, when I started roasting, I was in a position in my life where I had some time, and I was interested in the process I was interested in coffee, let's just say that. But I didn't really understand what it was. I saw green coffee for the first time the day I bought my roasting machine, which is like a wild thing to think of now. I bought a little secondhand bullet and started messing around with that. And I had no intention of starting a business with it. It was just going to be a hobby. But obviously that progressed pretty quickly. But the whole point for me was I was so... I'm a fairly introverted person by nature. I've taught myself to be a little bit outgoing and engaging with people, but I used to become so intimidated walking into specialty cafes and asking questions of the baristas. And to this day, I think that perhaps they didn't know enough to want to engage back out of fear. I think that's probably the case, but I took it as like a reluctance to share knowledge. So I felt like if I wanted to learn it, I'd have to do it myself. So when I started the business, I was like, we're going to be the opposite of that and just be like fun and approachable. And even the latest packaging, it's kind of like, then there was a new pressure. And the pressure was, we're sending bags to Sweet Spot. Like this was literally the internal discussion that was happening was, our bags are cute, and the illustrations are nice. Some people love them, but when they're on the shelf next to like, you know,
Say
Tim
or
Weddleberg and
something.
Say, all these guys, and they don't look that professional. So we better do something about that. And I told Marcus the story, and he was actually in Italy on holiday when the first batch arrived with the new packaging, and he sent me a voice note. He's like, I walked back into the shop for the first time and I saw the bags on the shelf, and he's like, if that was really your goal, you guys nailed it. He's like, your packaging looked great on the shelf, and they sold out in like 8 days or something like that,
awesome.
which is great to hear after you know what it's like. You put so much energy into these things and they don't just happen, you know, it's like a lot of work.
For sure.
But the goal is to remain like high quality but easily accessible. Because I love wine as well, and I find that world very pretentious, much more than coffee, I think. But it definitely slows down the consumer's progression because there's just a fear around asking the wrong question.
I think like specialty coffee in London especially, but I think in Europe and maybe definitely the US as well, like there's this kind of history of a structured hierarchy. I think it's changed a little bit now. It used to be very kind of hyper masculine in London, like it's a lot more inclusive, I would say now, than it has been in the past, although there's still a lot more work to do. But actually enabling your customers to come in and feel welcomed and feel willing to ask questions is surely, as a business owner, but also as someone who's invested in the success of the business in which you're working, like that should be at the top of your agenda. Like, how do you bring people in, make them feel welcome, make them want to come back, hopefully, and also like, you know, those little bits of education as well along the way where people can learn just a little bit more about, okay, what is coffee, what makes your coffee special, and then slowly continuing this journey to become, you know, potentially a lifelong customer, invested in you because they actually share the same kind of outlook on coffee as you, because you've been the one to bring them into it.
Exactly.
You know, this is all like straightforward, but whenever you encounter businesses which have this kind of brick wall or this mask of bravado about them, or this kind of false sense of projection of knowledge that you don't actually have. Like, it's okay to not know things. You know, I've been in coffee now 7 or 8 years, and you know, there are a lot of things I don't know. A lot of my learning is focused around what I need to do well in competition, for example, and I neglect other things. So I've only really started taking competition seriously when I entered Brewers Cup last year for fun. So like it's okay to like admit that you don't know something, but I think that we're in danger sometimes of slipping back into that culture of, you know, I'm an expert in something, like this is the way it should be because I say it is, and okay, here's some pseudoscience explanation of that, but this very harsh kind of poor service, like know-it-all approach I hate.
Oh my word,
I'm glad it seems we're moving away from it.
It definitely does. I remember coming into coffee, and a friend of mine who's a Q grader, I leaned on him quite heavily for like initial questions and that kind of stuff, but I quickly realized that I was going to have to figure a lot out myself, because his answer to everything was like, it's a bell curve. So we always joke now, whenever there's a question about anything we don't really know the answer to, it's like, it's a bell curve.
I think also like, you know, whenever you own a cafe, you own a roastery, like it's easy to make coffee good, taste good in that setting, because you roast a certain way and you figured out how to brew in a certain way, and your roasting is reflective of your brewing and vice versa. It's not always easy to do that when you step outside of that. And it's not always easy to have the answer for everything. And whenever, I'm sure you have wholesale customers that have questions, and you know, it's very difficult to put yourself into their situation over an email and figure out what's gone wrong. But like,
absolutely. I mean, we had a situation the other day which was bizarre. We had a long-term customer, wholesale customer, who contacted us and said, listen, this weekend everyone's been complaining about the coffee being bitter. Has something changed? And we're like, no, nothing's changed. So our wholesale manager went down to just go and see what was going on. And they'd had a technician come and service their machine. And while servicing the machine, he made an executive decision that the volumetrics need to be changed. And they were pulling, the recipe they were running was like 18 and 70 grams out
Wow.
into quite a short cup. And I was like, never mind bitter. There's a whole lot going on here. So, and yes, to answer that, we have like all these WhatsApp groups with our main, customers, and it's really difficult to guide people through that type of
understanding remotely, especially. But obviously, if you're able to send someone, but understanding remotely what has gone wrong is very, very difficult.
And sending somebody is, I think it's the case all over the world for like larger wholesale focused roasteries. That's part of their strategy is to like keep a lot of their customers in a situation where they really need them. We can't do that. We don't have a big enough team. So our approach is education,
I like it.
Empowerment, man. We don't want to dye your grinder.
But that's, it's an interesting point as well. Like, what kind of business do you want to build? Do you want to, and this is the question for us as we start out in wholesale, do we want to build a business where people are beholden to us as wholesale customers? I mean, that's a very leading question. The answer is no. Like, we want to build a business where people like love the relationship, love the value that we have to offer, and love working together. Contracts are nice, but it's nice like to have the idea of where we don't have to, because there's no equipment involved, for example, not having contracts and simply having like a kind of faith-based relationship where we'll try our best to do everything we can to make you as successful as possible, and you'll keep buying coffee from us.
I think if I can share anything, having been a little bit down this road in wholesale, we don't have, at the moment, we don't have any contracts with any customers, but we don't supply equipment. We don't do that at all. In my mind, when it comes to business, I tend to only enjoy doing things that are scalable. So if it's not scalable, I won't touch it because it's not worth starting. And I'm not willing to like hold the risk of that much equipment out in the marketplace. So that's the main reason. But what I will say is that because of that like faith and trust-based relationship, we've had a very low turnover. Our customers have been very, very loyal. And the only time that I can think of, I don't think we've ever had anyone move away because they weren't happy with us or the coffee or anything like that. There have been a few instances where a very close friend started roasting coffee and they felt obliged. There was a couple of situations. And then price. There's always an incentive for a shop that isn't focused on quality to just move to a cheaper product. But to their detriment normally, What I will say though is that the trust and faith-based approach had led me down the path of being a little bit lenient with payments. And I have had to work very hard over the last 18 months to bring some big volume accounts under control again financially. And now that we're there with almost everybody, I'm sleeping a lot easier. So I think contracts, unless you're willing to go to court to fight them, are not really helpful to anybody. But at the same time, like, stay on top of the accounts. You can't be the bank.
It's a very good point.
I think the only reason we'd go into contracts now is we're looking at working with our bank to, one of the biggest challenges we have, we'll probably end up talking about it at the Akawa event tomorrow night, because I see it's one of the points on the agenda. But one of our biggest challenges is that the quality of coffee we work with is not really being imported to South Africa by green coffee importers. So we're having to do all of that ourselves. And there's a partner we have worked with for some bigger lots, and they'll probably listen to this podcast. And like openly, they're amazing. I love them. And the gentleman I work with is a really dear friend. But we've had like such interruption to quality supply this year that we've had to like make plans, and it's not the way I want to do business. So we are looking at working with the bank now to help us to bring in more of that style of coffee. But now they want contracts. They're like, it's all good and well that you work with these awesome people, but like
they're not tied in.
So my argument is like, are you going to pay to fight if the defects of the contract? Because I'm not. So we'll see what happens there. But from your perspective, I mean, obviously the cafe is what, 5-6 years old now?
5 years.
5 years. Roastery much newer?
I suppose we've been roasting for ourselves for 3 years.
3 years, okay.
But maybe like wholesale, we did a little bit last year, but competition this year took a lot of focus of it. So we've started now with a couple of people doing wholesale for us part-time. So it's a process. It can kind of hand off and should run itself throughout the year. And we've got a few house accounts now too, which is
super helpful.
Yeah, which makes everything easier.
I suppose when you're renting time on a machine of the size that you do, you need to move that volume. And
I mean, for us, what's been really beneficial is my business partner Nick, actually has a white label company.
Okay.
So he has like already had enough volume to justify. I think he was roasting like 1 day a month, but then like we're able to not bear any fixed costs whatsoever. We just pay Nick's white label company. So this is way too much detail for the time that we actually use.
That's brilliant.
So between him and I, we're able to keep our costs really, really low and really focused on just our usage. And it's fantastic. It helps him out because he can roast more regularly for the white label stuff as well. And it helps us out because we're able to grow very sustainably and able to, whenever we stopped focusing on wholesale a little bit, we were able to just flex downwards and, not have any adverse consequences.
Exactly.
And then now when we're growing like month on month wholesale, like it's just very easy for us to
scale
consume
that.
a little bit more of his like allocated time.
That's brilliant. Really nice. What a great solution.
Yeah.
That's really, really exciting. So obviously that's a focus on the wholesale front.
Yeah.
Do you have ambitions to open more cafes? I know you said you want to move back to Northern Ireland. Is there?
Yeah, I think even if I did, like it will always. Yes is the answer. The ambition was always to open 5 or 6 cafes in London and a roastery. It's finding the right time, finding the right space, and figuring out what I would want to do with that business. Initially, whenever I started Formative, I thought I'll have 5 or 6 cafes, and they will all do everything radically different as an illustration that you can do like
different from each other.
Yeah,
cool.
Like that you can do like high quality coffee in different ways and be successful, right? Like.
I mean,
I don't know
that's potentially making your life
Yeah.
Infinitely harder.
Yes.
But I love the concept.
I don't know whether that would be the approach I would follow now, but you know, even though I feel that we are radically differentiated from a lot of cafes in London in terms of quality and like our style of service, there are still things that I would want to change in a secondary cafe. And my thought is that, you know, if I open a new cafe and we do, you know, this extra thing, do we then need to go and retrofit our original to do that? So there's a lot of unanswered questions, and at the minute, like it's quite easy for us with a single location and with training space, a little bit of consulting, and still a focus on competition. I'm now building the roastery out. Like financially, the roastery, just focusing on the roastery for a few more years, just that solely makes a lot more financial sense because we have no fixed cost base and because like our margins are really good. That makes a lot of sense. So absolutely. I don't know, it's all up in the air. If I saw the right site and everything kind of aligned in terms of landlord and finances and everything, then probably the answer would be yes, but there's no like plan
right now.
Yeah. But what about you? Like, I think that obviously you grew for almost accidentally into running a roastery, but presumably with a plan now. But
there is a plan. I tend to like plan quite far ahead. It's a bit of a weird one because I plan quite far ahead in my mind.
Yeah.
But I'm actually like, it all lives in my mind.
Yeah.
It's not really written down.
Yeah.
I do have like, you know, day-to-day things that have to happen that are written down. But so yeah, I started roasting for fun and then roasted like, I don't know, 10 batches of coffee in the first day and realized that needs to go somewhere.
Yeah.
You know? So that's the only reason I started selling coffee was just to like get rid of it.
Yeah.
And so I could keep roasting because I love the science of it. And I'm like I've realized about myself through this whole process, I'm quite creative, but I'm much more science, you know, based or focused. Well, it comes more naturally to me. Mm-hmm. But I just loved roasting coffee. That was the whole thing. So I have called it my passion project from day one. So it went from like real hobby to like hobby business.
Yeah.
With the worst packaging you've ever seen in your entire life. I'm embarrassed about it now.
You have to start somewhere.
It lives somewhere on the internet. It's quite funny. It was like this terrible bird sitting on a branch, and the name Bluebird had nothing to do with the Bluebird anyway. It was about happiness and like that type of thing. But I don't know how we ended up there. And then it was just like it went from hobby business to the point where I realized that I could actually do something with this. And I'm the kind of person who, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it to the best of my ability. And that's where we are now. I feel like we're kind of just getting the foundations in place. You know, it's still a very young company. I've got an amazingly talented team. I think that I could find myself in a position where I was happy doing like super, super high quality, almost on my own. A part of my personality and brain would be satisfied with just being like completely quality focused at low volume but high margin. But I really want to build the brand. I really want to see where it can go. And there's something, I enjoy a good challenge. And there's something challenging about building an international coffee brand from South Africa. And then there's something extra hard about building it from one of the smallest towns in the most random locations.
It's
and
good to challenge yourself.
If you can't make it hard, why do it? You know? I don't have plans to open more cafes, but I guess if the right opportunity came up, I may look at it. You know, but I would be more interested in opening a training space in an area that was more accessible, because we're quite far out, and although we have an amazing training space and an amazing trainer, we don't have as big of a market for training as I would like. So we may need a warehouse and a training space at some point. But for me, it's really about building something that matters beyond just coffee, which is a very ambitious sort of thing to aim to do. But if we can make people's lives better, including my own, my family's life, my staff's lives, and then obviously the people we work with in the supply chain and customers, that's great. You know, and I'll be super happy with that. But I think there's so much like hate in the world. You know, there's like it's such a dumb thing to say, I suppose, but there's so much to be negative about. You know, we kind of like, I feel like we're geared for negativity. You know, we see problems, we see discrimination everywhere. We live with it. We're a part of this like big system of negative news and so on and so forth. And I really just hope to create this like little bubble of positivity and almost like the pursuit of happiness, you know, if nothing else. So, and all the while exploring this crazy product that I had no idea would be so interesting and so complex and so exciting when I started. So we'll see what the future holds.
I think though, like that's, you know, one of the things that's really tempting about retail is because you can see a very physical manifestation of like what you're talking about, like somewhere where people can come in and, you know, it's like the whole thing of, you know, you make your customer a little bit happier than
exactly.
And that's why it's really tempting. And like we do e-commerce and we do wholesale, and that's fantastic. We have some great partners on wholesale. But I always feel like the cafe that you have the control over is such a great opportunity to actually bring people in. You have so much more control over how people perceive your coffee. You have so much more control over building a brand around that. I don't know, even as someone who's studied computer science, like I struggle with the idea of like having this like solely internet-based brand, you know. But I think that what does the cafe then become? Is it a way to connect with your e-commerce customers, with your wholesale customers, and anyone who happens to come in? Or is it like, I want to build a business by building cafes? Because it's so much more work to open cafes than
Absolutely.
to like double your revenue on like wholesale.
I mean, opening cafes as a good business idea must be one of the biggest misconceptions in the world.
Yeah.
You know? I think it's
very true.
so much harder than people realize, and the
Yeah.
margins are so much tighter than people realize. But I agree with you. It is really satisfying to see people like come in and have their aha moment in front of you.
Yeah.
But as you say, in your cafe, you can literally sit there all day watching people take that sip and go you know, like that was good.
Yeah. I don't like. I think that if you were very cash rich as a roastery, not you, if one was very cash rich as a roastery, and you already had a lot of customers, like it's a good way to. You can open up in a new city. You can look at where all your e-commerce customers are, and if they're in, you know, part X of the country, you can find a cafe there, open up. You already have brand recognition, and then you can have a training space. You can build more wholesale custom, but it's very hard to say, you know, as us with a single cafe and a roastery that, you know, by opening another cafe in London, like our brand is gonna like suddenly double in value. I'm not sure, and there's risks as well.
Absolutely. We had this is a bit of an aside, but I think it's quite relevant. There was a restaurant, like a very old restaurant in a city near to where I live, that had done so well for so long, to such an extent. It was an Italian restaurant, prime location on a prime street. They opened a second location, and I think it was within about a year, the second location took down both locations financially. And it was like the city cried for them. You know, they cried for themselves and for the owners. They've since reopened. The space isn't as nice and whatever, but there's that risk. You know, that risk does exist. And yes, of course, from a financial point of view, there's ways to protect yourself from that happening. But I think just because you've done it well once doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to happen again automatically. But I do think that if you found a winning recipe and you found the right location, that's where the temptation would come in, even for us. I swore blind I wouldn't open a single cafe, now I've got one, and it's like, I'm never doing another one. And
it's co-located with your roastery.
It is. Well. It's not really a cafe on its own. Like, I also developed the business, the building that we're in. So that was like not a side project. That was like an all-consuming project while building a business. Like, so I tend to bite off a lot, you know, but it's good. I mean, it's
rewarding.
Yeah, suckers for pain. If the reward's not there, I suppose you wouldn't do it again. But it is exciting, and the podcast thing is like, it's so interesting, and it's so great to sit down and have this conversation, because I find personally it's really it's rare to get around people in your industry, and I think this is true to so many industries. If you're an obsessive person, it's difficult to find other obsessive people. But in the coffee industry, I think that there is this group of people who are in their own areas of the industry are so obsessed, and it's so exciting to like get to engage with everybody. And my favorite part of the podcast is literally getting to sit down and pick people's brains around what they're excited about.
Well, you know, it's one of the reasons I think I keep competing is that even though, you know, backstage everyone's a little bit tense, like, you know that you share the environment and you share conversations with people that, you know, competition is its own thing in coffee. Like, you can have conversations about precisely how people produce their milk or, you know, process their milk for competition. And, you know, it needs to be if you're doing a rotary evaporator, it needs to be at this RPM and at this temperature for no longer than this. And where else can you have those conversations? Like, when you obsess and obsess, how useful it is, I don't know. But when you obsess and obsess and obsess over something, and it can be like coffee business where you focus on like high-end specialty coffee. Like, those are really good conversations as well to have with people. And in the UK, the number of people that run roasteries that, you know, the average coffee price is maybe on wholesale, maybe £50 per kilo or more. Like, there aren't very many roasteries that are like that. So having people that like you can actually pick their brain a little bit about,
absolutely,
is invaluable.
Yeah, I agree. No, spot on.
Yeah.
I do that to myself all the time.
So like obsession. Yeah, it makes it difficult to, you create sometimes you create a category for yourself to sit in. So whenever you find other people that happen to sit in the same category, you realize you're not quite like alone, but you have to look a lot further to find those same, like people with the same sort of focuses.
Yeah, my roastery manager took some leave and spent some time in Johannesburg where his family are, and he came back and he was like a little bit frustrated because he had gone to all these like cafes and he'd been interacting with these professionals, and he just said he realized that the conversations we have around, because the way we start our day every day is the whole team comes in and we brew filter coffee around our bar. And it's just wonderful. It's like that's where all the meaningful conversations really happen. And he just said like he realized that the conversations that we're having around that bar are very advanced. And it's quite difficult to find people who are as interested in what we are, even in the industry, to the extent where you can actually have those meaningful conversations. So you're right, the competition is like, the part that interests me is, being a part of the pointy edge. That's what really fascinates me, and I hope that you'll get to meet Fani and Luchles soon, my two team members who are into competition. Hopefully at World Barista Champs. They both have the talent and the drive and everything it takes to do really, really well. Fani's been knocking on the door. He finished third last year, second this year, and it's like,
it's the countdown.
Yeah, exactly. It's the countdown. So we know what's coming now. But I think it's cool to like be in the room.
Yeah. I think what you said though is really interesting. Like, I think London's the same. Like the level of conversation that people have around coffee is not necessarily what you would expect for a leading coffee city, again, air quotes. But what you said about like having this, it's about the space where you gather like in the morning before you do anything, and it's not with an agenda. It's an opportunity to like actually, before you get to work, before you deal with problems, to actually have conversations like that. For a lot of coffee professionals, doesn't exist.
No.
Maybe it exists where you go to like a cupping event, but mostly you're not talking to colleagues, you're talking to peers, and you have a kind of wall or a mask up, right? Where like you can't really share openly what the truth is. Or it's loud, like there's loud music or X,
and
Y,
also
Z,
if our cafe is, you couldn't be further away from what I experienced at Roslyn this morning. So as I said, we're in a small town, we're on Main Street, like we're in the middle of the small town. But we're not going to serve 1,000 cups a day. It's just never going to happen. And maybe that's the reason why I was okay with opening a cafe, because I don't actually want to own 1,000 cup a day cafe. For me, that just really does not appeal to me at all. But we almost have to walk the line of like clubhouse versus cafe sometimes, because it really does feel like that. And even our customers have become like so close, a lot of them, that it's like, it really is like familiar, and we have people walk behind the bar to put their cups in the sink, and I see it happening. I'm like, no, you can't do that.
But please don't.
Exactly. But I have to remind myself how fortunate we are actually, because the cafe is not what drives the business; it's the roastery. That's the engine room, and the cafe is one of the roastery's customers. And it doesn't have to be our biggest customer, because we have other customers. So it is great. But I think that if I relied. And also it's given me this amazing opportunity where my sister, my youngest sister, is actually our cafe manager now.
Oh, wow.
And she only came into coffee to come and work for me. And she's just like, it's one of those stories where she wasn't interested in coffee at all. And I would say that now she's a enthusiast, but not obsessed at all. But she is just so good with people. And to see her come out of her shell and run this cafe so well has been so rewarding. So if nothing else, I'll just keep the cafe going. So I can work with my sister.
So sweet. I think like that's a really good illustration as well. Like there are people who are obsessive and who are, I think, what did you say, at the pointy edge. But like coffee, and even specialty coffee, and even the top 10% or 5% of specialty coffee, like there's a lot of room for people of a wide variety of personalities. Like you don't have to be like an obsessive.
Absolutely.
It can be about service. It can be about, repetition, which some people love. It can be about, like, I love doing something that's precise in the roastery. It can be, we have a couple of people that work for us in the roastery that are just very attentive to small details, whether it's in roasting or packing, like all of these things. Like, there are so many opportunities for people who are not necessarily, thinking, okay, I want to, like, one day write a book about coffee or start a podcast or compete. Like, there's opportunities for such
and creatives. Like, this is an interesting product. How do we tell the story better?
Yeah.
I would say in our company, certain things have to happen for us to do what we do. I have to source good green.
Yeah.
We have to roast it well. But the things that, so I would say the two people in our company who would regard themselves as the least coffee professional, in air quotes again, people in the business, are probably the two people who have a wider reaching impact than all of us the rest of us put together. And that would be Claudia as cafe manager, the interactions that she has with real people face to face every day, that those interactions are making such an impact in those people's lives. And she's like really making coffee accessible. And she's brewing beautiful geishas on bar all the time and stuff like that. So she's working with these super high-end coffees, but for her it's much more about the customer interaction. And then my girlfriend Katie runs our creative side, and Katie has taken a long time to get to the point where she can accept that she's a coffee professional because she doesn't feel like that at all. But I'm like, listen, you're reaching tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people through our social media every month who are having interactions in some way with our content. How can you regard yourself as anything but,
I think, like, for all of its existence, specialty coffee in particular has been largely driven by storytelling.
Absolutely.
Right? Whether, words or images, but like now more than ever, I think that the kind of creative side, like, it has to be backed up by buying good coffee and roasting it well if you're a roastery. Like, that's a given. But how you actually communicate people and win people over and get people to buy into your brand is more important than ever. And it's harder, I think, than ever.
I agree with that. And the competition is, a few decades ago, I guess your competitor would be the guy down the street. Now it's like literally everybody from everywhere.
All over the world, And how do you communicate your brand to someone who, is going to buy just a bag off the shelf in, like, Sweet Spot?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Beyond what, like, Marcus or his team might tell people.
Well, it's the biggest reason I haven't pursued like retail stores. So in South Africa, like, a lot of the more successful coffee brands have got a range at least that they do for the retail stores. And I've just, like, rejected that from day one. We've got one retail store who stocks a bit of our coffee just because they're friends. But the biggest reason is for me, it's like what's the right word? It's like a tragedy to have a pretty bag from somebody else with some cheap commodity coffee, a pretty bag from us with some really good coffee, and the price difference is there, and people don't understand why, and there's no one to tell them.
There's
no
context.
What are we doing here?
And then, with other products like chocolate or wine or even like vegetables, like, you can buy those two things and you can take them home and you can prepare them and you can cook them if they need cooked, and then you can eat them and you can maybe discern a difference, especially where, like, chocolate or wine. But with coffee, you can take that home and you can brew it terribly, and the more expensive coffee can taste a lot worse to your palate because of preparation, most likely, than the cheap coffee. And that's the frustrating thing as well, I think.
And that's the beauty of having the cafe environment, is that you get to prepare it for them. That's what I do really enjoy about that. And it's the reason I went to Roslyn this morning, because I was like, I just need to see what our coffee's tasting like. And it's actually, it's a really interesting point. I was standing at my stronghold, roasting Jansen, and just obsessing about roast profiles, and I mean, let's be honest, I wasn't obsessing about the profile. I was obsessing about what it's going to taste like. And the roast profile to me is just like an irrelevant, it's super relevant once you have it, but in the moment it's quite an irrelevant thing. And I was talking to Katie about it on the phone, and like I wanted to come home and play with the kids, but I'm like working late because the coffee arrived late, and I'm trying to get it right and all the rest of it. And she made a point that like the second batch that we tasted before everyone left was exceptional. And I just wasn't prepared to stop there. And she's like, you know, you've got to realize that like everyone else would have stopped there, but you're still going. And I was like, unapologetic. That's like when I responded. And it really got me thinking, like that is probably because like yourself, I didn't have a background in coffee, so I came into this industry. There are a lot of interesting roasteries started up in the last few years, and not last few years actually, since the beginning of specialty coffee, where the name of the person starting the roastery was already known for some reason, whether it's consulting or competition or
another roastery.
Exactly. Whereas like starting from scratch with no reputation, you have to work extra hard to build it. And I think it's made, for me personally, it's definitely made me a better roaster and business owner, having to fight harder, or at least feel like you have to fight harder. But it has got its negatives as well, you know. You never feel like it's good enough.
I don't know a lot about like their business. Obviously, they have a really big presence, but like one thing that I always really liked about Onyx in the US was their slogan, like never settle for good enough. I thought, like, how do you make that true and still make money? You know what I mean?
And as big as they are. Do you know what I mean? Like when you're doing never settle for good enough and you're roasting on your Ikawa home at home, like I get that. But to do it at the scale that they've done it and continue to grow in the way that they are, they're one of my biggest inspirations when it comes to marketing. They've also got this like mural. I remember watching a video, they were like doing a little tour of the roastery, and there's this mural of a snake eating its own tail. And it's a reminder that like they eat their own profits and just keep investing and keep investing. And as a small business owner, it's like, it's nice to know that you're not alone. You know?
Push.
Keep pushing, man. Keep pushing, keep investing. I think it's necessary. You know, there's a customer we work with in the US, he's in like Colorado Springs or something like that. And he posted a meme the other day, and it was basically like that meme with the two red buttons and there's two red options, and he's like, pay myself or buy something new for the coffee business. And I was like, dude, it's not even a question. You and I both know what the answer is already, you know. And he did a poll and most people said pay yourself. And I was like, I responded to him and I was like, that's why they're not successful.
It's like, I think that, you know, you can be wrong, but like, I think as an entrepreneur, you have to be, you have to be a little bit foolish, but you have to like think, okay, I've attained this level of success, and okay, I could take a salary now and I could just pay myself that, or I can, as you say, you know, invest that money in something new. And where will that take me? Where's the next sort of adventure always? Where is the next push? And where can we end up in 10 years? I'm happy with like what I'm roasting now, or I'm happy with the level of customers. And, you know, you said, I think earlier, that one of your favorite like resets was like traveling, like to reset your mentality. For me, like it's always, despite the fact that like I've not always, and I'm often not rich in time or money, like trying to force yourself to think beyond those constrictions and say, well, if we did have the money, how would we approach this?
Exactly.
You know, so that allows you to maybe think. I've always found it kind of unleashes the creativity and problem solving a little bit more.
I love that. I don't know if you're a big reader.
Audiobooks now with a
amazing.
toddler, but
exactly. Two books that I read early on, but one in particular before I started Bluebird was The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek, and just the basic concept of decision making as if you're not the last person who's going to benefit from this. You know, like we've just gone fully off the grid with solar panels. It was flipping expensive.
That's
We have
awesome.
power problems anyway,
Yeah.
so we kind of had to do it,
Yeah.
but we didn't have to do it to the level that we did.
Yeah.
But to spend the money once, suck it
And
up.
it hurts
It's going to be
for a
painful
while.
now. Exactly.
Yeah.
I have this plan. Like, my kids are really young, 5 and 3.
Yeah.
So it's like, by the time I need a lot of money for them, I need
Yeah.
to pay off these loans.
Yeah.
So if the business can just survive to pay off the loans, there'll be
Yeah.
enough money for them to like have what they need.
Nice.
Like, that's a very sort of like broad stroke sort of.
It's a good
There
strategy.
is more of a
yeah.
plan than just that.
No. But I mean, sometimes you do tell yourself these things just to get you through the next hurdle. It's,
Exactly.
Nah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Investing in the future. That's
Yeah,
what it
exactly. I think if we don't believe in what we're doing, we wouldn't invest in it.
Yeah.
And it's exciting to consistently speak to people who are doing exciting things in coffee, who evidently have a deep-seated belief that what they're doing is not only important, but it's going to be important in years to come.
Yeah.
And I really enjoy that. There are a lot of industries where there's a lot of doubt about the future.
Yeah.
And I think we kind of know that it's going to be good.
Yeah.
People are going to keep drinking coffee.
Yeah.
And I think we're seeing people like trending towards better coffee.
Yeah.
Which is exciting, even if it is happening slowly.
Yeah. I don't know what the future of Arabica is, but I think there are projects going on in the world that are starting to show that even if the climate changes radically, and even if Arabica is ravaged by disease, like, there are other species
Absolutely.
that can work. And I think with coffee, maybe it's something that isn't as big in London for a while. Maybe it's something that isn't as big in New York for a while. But like, these things come in waves as well, and it will always be, I feel, like this ritualistic thing which people can gather over, and can enjoy, and people have enjoyed for centuries now.
Absolutely.
Like brewing and drinking coffee. And I mean, for me, it's one of the greater pleasures in life. So I don't see it disappearing anytime soon.
I mean, me too. And if it does, red wine will be around, and I'll jump
Yeah.
into that. So.
Yeah.
But I think you're spot on. And I also have this belief in life and in business. And I think it's probably a bit of a, what would the right word be? It sounds like it's a very egotistical sort of thing, which I don't intend it to be. But if anyone's drinking coffee, even if the market shrinks, as long as they're drinking your coffee and my coffee, will be okay.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
but that's the kind of position that you want to put yourself in whenever you create a business which is, an embodiment of what you believe, right?
Yep.
Like, you're not solely running a business to make money. I mean, that's
exactly
part of it, but you're trying, like, for us, whenever we started, I wanted to change the conversation around pay for baristas, wanted to change the conversation around like what quality coffee is for customers, but also for coffee professionals, and like actually change how we thought about how cafes could be run in London. And like, to some extent, I think we accomplished all of those in various measures. We don't have millions of customers, but those people that do come to us often, they are challenged a little bit in how they think about coffee. So I think like you can have goals which are bigger than just open a cafe. It's a nice cafe I own, and my friends come there and I make some money. Like, you can have bigger goals, even if it's just a standalone single retail location. And those are the businesses that are actually exciting to go to as a customer, because they have personality, and it doesn't mean that they have quotes on the walls or whatever.
Exactly.
It's like, you can see
a purpose
that,
to them.
Yeah, it's thought out. It's not a tick box business where, there's a small chain in London where the owner, before he opened, went around all of those popular coffee shops and did a survey of, which coffee machine do they have? Okay, that one. What type of floor do they have? What type of lighting? And that's how he's fitted out his first cafe, was the most popular of each of these.
That's really, really interesting.
Like, how do you create a cafe which actually has personality?
Yeah.
It's not by just creating the average or, ripping off someone else.
That actually, for me, that's, I would be scared to do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
To be honest, because I think the long term, the best thing you can possibly do is create a real different point of differentiation.
Yeah.
You know, if you're just the sum of the averages, it's a bit of
Yeah.
a scary place to be.
I think in cafes, I kind of get it because, at least in a big city like London, you can look at what's been successful in one area and it doesn't exist somewhere else, and you can just copy and paste. But I think on a personal level, you know, we've taken inspiration from other people, but we've never like copied. I feel, you know, like I've taken inspiration from cafes I've never been to, but. Like Instagram is a big driver, but like
Absolutely.
to start a business that is just like by the numbers solely, I might do that, but not in an industry that is so like personal and so people driven as coffee.
Absolutely. I mean, if you're selling Toyotas,
That's
probably a really good way to do it.
Precisely.
But I completely agree with that.
Yeah.
To wrap up, I mean, like, let's talk coffees first. Is there a species outside of Arabica that you're most excited about that you've tasted recently?
Excelsa.
Excelsa, okay.
Yeah. Well, I don't know whether we've already chatted about it on the podcast or whether it was pre-podcast.
I think it was pre-podcast, yeah.
We have a little bit of Excelsa.
I've never tasted it.
Have you tasted Eugenioides?
Yes.
From Immaculata?
Yep.
It's very similar in terms of sweetness to Eugenioides, like very, very similar, but it has more structured like acidity. Like, you know how Eugenioides is like super low acidity? It's got like a medium acidity and really structured, really balanced coffee, super delicious.
Is there any roasted in your shop at the moment by any chance?
No. I don't. We might have a sample. When do you leave?
I leave on Friday.
So, I mean, our first production of roast of it is next Friday.
Okay.
Maybe I can get you some in Paris or something.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love that.
Or I can ship you some to South
I'm
Africa.
happy to ship it to South Africa, obviously. I'd love to taste it.
Like Liberica, I think we have some on its way as well, but it's not something I've tasted much of. But yeah, Excelsa, I'm super excited about. Like, it's come via a company called the South Indian Coffee Company, who are doing a lot of varietal and species research.
Okay.
So yeah, very excited about their work and like Excelsa, I think.
And where is it from?
So it's from South India. I can send you the name later.
Cool.
Yeah, it's a farm we
won't put it on the podcast.
Good plan.
We'll stew in Milan with it in October.
You can just like put on a sort of my accent and just dub it in. But it's like is it Moulay Manai or something like that?
Okay.
Yeah. I think it might be a farm that's sort of famous in India, but I don't know a lot of Indian farms.
To be honest with you, I wouldn't.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know.
Yeah.
You know, when you like go to a new city and it's like, oh, what part of the city do you live in? And like, they could say anything, you have no idea.
Who've heard of like two places.
Okay, so that's an interesting species. Producer?
That I'm excited about. Let's see. I mean, lots. I mean, so Marcus Duran, who won BOP Washed, like we had his coffees in very small amounts the last couple of years, and they were really exciting. I'm really excited to see, like that he's found some success and super earnest, really nice guy. Very excited. Who else? Let's see. I think so. In the UK. And in Europe as well, we're quite familiar with a company called Cata. It's run by a woman called Catalina and her partner. She's Colombian, and they're a Colombian exporter. But they've just, I think this year or last year, bought their own farm.
Okay.
So quite excited to see what happens there.
Jeez, that's very cool.
Yeah, I think like, because like she's been working with Nestor Lasso and like lots of really great Colombian producers over the past few years. I think they're going to do a really interesting job. Like processing, don't know what processing is going to be like. They've bought a farm that had kind of, as I remember, sorry, my mind's gone blank. They bought a farm which, as I remember it, had kind of gone into decline because of the health of the previous owner. So like it's grown coffee. I think it has great like water sources, so it supplies water to the local village. So I have every hope that they're going to be able to produce not just fantastic coffee, but like corn, avocados.
Amazing.
You know, all of this. But yeah, I think her insight into both the European market, and actually she worked for Rosalind for a while she was in London. But her insight, but also her connections, existing connections in Colombia, give me very high hopes about what they're going to do over the next few years.
That's exciting. I must, follow their journey and see what comes from that. I think I have had interactions with the company before. They've like sent me some offer lists and that type of thing.
Yeah.
But that's very cool.
Yeah.
And then I haven't asked everybody this on the podcast, but I've asked a few people, like, in the last sort of like period of time, whatever you want to call it, is there a cup of coffee in your cafe, outside of your cafe, that was like really, really memorable that you wish you could like get more of?
Yes. I don't know, as coffee professionals, I think especially that buy a lot of very high-end coffee, it's very hard to find something that like really moves you anymore. You can say like, this is exceptional.
Yes.
Right? And say that objectively, and it is exceptional, and maybe it's a like 92 or 93 point coffee. But to find something that you like almost emotionally connect with is very rare. I think, was it last week? Last week we were cupping Panamanian coffees for potentially, we're helping someone compete in Brewers Cup in Italy, and we were looking for a coffee for them. I don't even remember what the farm is called or anything. It's a natural geisha from Panama. I know the name, but I don't want to say it now. Like the coffee name. But like we cupped it and it was so balanced, had like beautiful structured acidity. And I came back to it, we had a call in the middle. We were like, yes, it's this. This is, well, I mean, we bought 3 coffees, but this is the coffee we want for competition. And the other 2 are kind of backups. And we went and had a call for 2 hours and came back and cupped it stone cold. And I had goosebumps, like cupping it, because it's like one of those coffees that cools so elegantly and just really opened up. And like the roast, it was a sample roast. It was like it wasn't perfect. We think we can get more vibrancy out of it, but just the balance, the sweetness, the acidity, and the flavor clarity. Like, in some ways, it was just like a classic natural Panamanian geisha, but it was just a very, very, very good example
Very
of it.
good example. Yeah. We do become a bit... So I love the answer, because I think natural Panamanian geishas are just, like, I can't go past a really good washed Kenyan.
Yeah.
Like, that's just my... if I had to drink one coffee for the rest of my life, that would probably be it.
Well, that's always an interesting question. Yeah. So would it be a washed Kenyan?
It would be a washed Kenyan. This year, interestingly, we bought coffee from... we always buy from Kamwangi factory. I just love their coffees. But this year, they haven't really been... We're busy selling them at the moment. We're busy working with them, and they're good. They're really tasty. One of the lots we bought is a lot more stone fruit forward than the typical profile we look for. But they've been really good. But we've always tend to buy another factory's coffees. Yeah. But it's almost never the same one year in, year out. We bought a coffee from Kanamui this year that's been exceptional, like one of the better Kenyans we've had in a long time. So yeah, a washed Kenyan would be my sort of like desert island coffee. Yeah. But, I'm very grateful that my team aligns with me on this. Yeah. Like natural Panamanian geishas for competition. Like if we're looking for comp coffees, I'm knocking down Jansen's door. Yeah. They probably get so frustrated with me. Like I over communicate so much. But they fortunately they've been kind enough to like send us some really good coffees. That's and awesome. This year we got some great ones. And then we buy from a very small producer called Franceschi. And there's a connection to Carmen Estate. I think it's a family connection. Okay. And then also to, oh my gosh, I've gone blank, another very famous producer. And I think it's through family. But Carlos and his partner, the actual owners of Franceschi Coffee, are dairy farmers who just love coffee. Yeah. So they produce like a tiny amount every year. Yeah. And Sam Cora put me onto them, and so cool. So cool. Like we've had coffee from them twice now. I think we've sent some to you. Well, no, No, we sent some tomatoes.
Okay.
I might have some with me though. But just like classic natural geisha, and it's just so good, man.
Yeah. I mean, similarly, I think the coffee, someone asked me when I was in Brazil, like, what would your go, if you had to drink the same coffee every day, what would it be? And without a shadow of a doubt, it would be like natural Ethiopia.
Okay,
Like,
that's so good. Like,
because it almost, like a good example of it, roasted well, has almost everything. It's like perfect breakfast coffee sometimes because it's fruity, but it maybe has some chocolate in it.
absolutely.
You know, but it also has like enough fruit and like enough florals to like carry you through in the afternoon.
And there's like some good
whatever.
acidity, but it's not overpowering.
Yeah.
I get that.
It's nuanced. That's
I
actually
get
the
that.
reason we started roasting was we found 88 point natural Ethiopia that I could buy and have roasted for less money than we were paying another roastery for like an 85 point, like Colombia or something. And I was like, why would we not buy something that's cheaper and tastes better?
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly. But yeah, Ian, I really appreciate your time. It's been
a pleasure.
great to chat, and I'm more excited to be in your cafe tomorrow. It's going to be epic. Like,
thank you.
I know one person who's given me personal feedback from last week. And as I said to you before we started recording, favorite coffee in London. And what he didn't write in that message is by some margin. So I'm really looking forward to it, and I hope my coffees could taste good on your bar.
I'm sure they will. You just send me your water spec and I'll make you some water tomorrow.
Oh my gosh, yeah. No, I think Batch Baby, the team from Batch Baby got in touch and they were like, what do you want us to do with your coffees? And I was like, just make them how you make your coffee.
Nice.
And I'm just there to add value however I can. So I apologize, you've got the worst barista in our team, but I'll do my best.
I mean, you can't be worse than me.
No, well,
practicality.
Yeah. I think that's a big thing. Is like I can relate to that.
Yeah.
Like dialing in at competition where I shine.
Yeah.
Everything after that, I'm just like bang average.
Yeah.
We actually had a day a few weeks ago where I opened the cafe and then our barista had a hard time getting to work, and I was like, oh shit, I'm gonna have to brew coffee today.
It's a whole other world.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Well, thanks again. Hey,
My pleasure.
Awesome. Thanks for joining me for another episode of the Coffee Made Me Do It podcast. I just love these conversations, learning from my peers, and just exploring motivation, passion, and purpose in and around the coffee industry. I hope you'll join us in the next one. We'll be back soon. Ciao.